Welcome to the Liberty Collaborative, where the past meets the present in the fight for freedom. We uncover the roots of liberty, spotlight the people who shaped it, and explore what it takes to preserve it today. If you're ready to think deeper, stand stronger, and act with purpose, you're in the right place. Let's reclaim what matters most.
Welcome, everybody, to the Liberty Collaborative. My name is Aaron Bowman, and I'm your host today. I am joined with Chris Coyle, who is the Wins Lab founder. So if you want to know how to handle a room or answer those tough questions, he is the guy that you need to talk to. And last but not least, we have the man, the myth, the legend, who is publishing on Substack constantly and getting the message out there, Mike Hancock. And welcome, gentlemen. We are going to be joined by K. Carl Smith, hopefully a little later. He had some personal things to attend to, and we might have our first guest calling in today because we've got a topic that I think everybody's going to find very interesting, and that's this No Kings protest that's coming up this weekend. So with that being said, welcome, fellas. How is everybody?
Doing great.
Doing great this morning.
You know, we're in historic times, guys. One never knows. Obviously, decades from now, centuries from now, they'll look back and say, this is how consequential these events are now. But they're certainly rich in what we focus on at Liberty Collaborative, Aaron and Michael. One is giving people much more context and facts around issues that you don't get from the mainstream media. And two, which is vital, is historical perspective, which people apparently have even forgotten what the last presidential administration did with some of the very same authority they're claiming now is a dictator.
Yeah, I totally agree, Chris. I'm sitting here in Colorado watching what's going on here, and I'm looking at these what are just clearly and obvious attacks on our liberty, Orwellian attacks on our liberty. And I've just written another op-ed that's entitled, what's it entitled? It's entitled The Peaceful Protest Roost, right? And what I do in that op-ed is that actually I describe how Orwellian techniques like doublethink and newspeak are being deployed and forced upon our citizenry to really rob us of our liberty. So I think people will find that interesting reading.
And how timely, Aaron. I mean, Aaron, I don't know if you want to give the listeners a little background, but this weekend, right, from what happened in LA, now they're stirring up, which happens to be Flag Day. They're doing it all over the country. Aaron, you want to give the listeners a little background? You did some great work there.
Yeah. So for those of you who are just listening to the podcast, we're actually going to be looking at some of the nokings.org website and some of the stuff that they have as far as organizing. And, it's interesting, Chris, that you say that it's Flags Day. It's the Army's birthday. And all you hear from others is it's Trump's birthday, and this is all about Trump, and this parade's all about Trump, and he's like Stalin and all these other people, and it's really just not the case. So for those of you who are going to watch this video, I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to blow this up. So here is their main website, and what's really scary, guys, is how well funded they are and how organized. So as you go through this, it actually kind of tells you, on June 14th, we rise up. You can host an event. They have a host toolkit, and we're going to dive into that too. But if you look, and hold on a second, we have our guest calling in. Hey, Jackie, timing. Can you hear us?
I can. Good morning.
Good morning,
Jackie.
Good morning.
How's it going?
It's going good. We were actually just talking about the nokings.org website and how amazingly well funded it looks like and organized it is. And you can go. So we have Mike Hancock on with us, who's out in Colorado, and they have a map where you can actually go and see when and where in your state these rallies are going to be. And, they give some more information on their main website. But what really got me, guys and gals, Jackie, because that's who's on with us. For those who are listening, she is also in Connecticut. And I'll have you give just a brief background on who you are, Jackie. But when you get into their host toolkit, you actually get a notification because it's a Google Doc that some of the aspects of that document may not be available because the amount of traffic they're getting, but it's a very, very, it looks like ChatGPT put it together, but it's very well structured. So I know you've been following this, reporting on it. Can you kind of just give the listeners a 30,000 foot view of who you are and your connection to all this?
Sure. My name is Jackie Homan. I have started a group in my town, Greenwich, Connecticut, called Greenwich Patriots. We came together over mask and vaccine mandates and critical race theory in the school. And we found that one of the main groups that opposed us, at least locally, was a group called Invisible Greenwich. And we started to get some better insight into what they're doing and how they're operating and what they focus on. From there, I helped to build and serve as the editor for an alternative media site in Connecticut called the Connecticut Sentinel, CENTINAL. And I'm trying to provide a space for conservative voices to provide either op-eds, factual opinions and articles, and other information that's been blocked out of the mainstream media. So that's my sort of 30,000.
You're a force to be reckoned with, Jackie. You've really built followers and supporters like here, Aaron and I in Connecticut, and really all over the country. I think you've been recognized nationally for what you've been doing.
Yeah, we have a bit of a following. Yeah, and part of it is because I've been covering things like these protests. And so, you know, what you mentioned about this toolkit, right? That toolkit is it's sort of a cookie cutter thing. And what I found out is that pretty much every month there is a branded protest like this since Trump's been in office. It started out with the, you know, quote unquote Tesla takedowns. And then they had the hands-off rallies, and then they had the 50501 rally, and then it was May Day, and now it's No King's Day. Every single one of these protests has its own website. It has a toolkit exactly like the toolkit that you were just looking through. The toolkit includes information, even, you know, things like how to get insurance and, you know, security to make sure that everyone is safe, know your rights training. They write these guys poems and chants and things like that. But every single one of these is packaged and put together the same way. They're backed by all the unions, all the labor unions, the education unions. They're backed by all the progressive activist groups. One thing that's pretty interesting is that on their flyers, they never put the name of the Communist Party on the flyer, but the Connecticut Communist Party operates in lockstep with every one of these protests, and they encourage the communists to go out there and protest alongside these groups. I've even seen that the latest one, and the No Kings one, is even being promoted by the League of Women Voters. That one kind of surprised me.
So, yeah, Jackie, I'm curious. Let's sort of deconstruct this together for a minute. Much like drop boxes and absentee ballots and all the different things, you have the context of what someone will say is organized, funded, quote, peaceful protest, right? So people show up. But the element people are just now learning about, the FBI's arrest of a couple of people and the investigation of the groups, is how do pallets of bricks arrive on a street corner? Who paid for them? Who paid for these organized people? So the construct that everyone needs to understand is sandwiched among these, quote, peaceful protesters are paid agitators. They're masked. They threaten the media to not take pictures if their masks come off. And the game, I'm going to throw it back to the group here, is that the peaceful protesters are not aware of, maybe not even participating in the violence, but the violent people throwing huge chunks of concrete, frozen water bottles, industrial strength fireworks, are hoping the police will react. And then the media gets the reaction with some of these, quote, innocents caught in the middle. And then they have the agitation claim. So it's really, again, performance art, Jackie. It seems to me you haven't had any violence yet in Connecticut, but it's all orchestrated that these agitators can come in and burn property and destroy police vehicles and injure cops.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty shocking, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I have termed the use of peaceful protesters as a Trojan horse for those other people that you're talking about there, Chris. They just, they're there as a mask to what's really going on, either consciously or unconsciously.
Guys, Jackie, I wonder, we all have probably more than a lot of people studied a lot of our founding and our Constitution. And when we think of Martin Luther King working so hard to make sure that as they marched across bridges, that they were peaceful, and what they pointed to was the Constitution and our founding and the right to be free, every man created equal. We were talking, Jackie, before you called in, that you can't find anywhere exactly what it is they're against or what they're for, except they're against Trump, the person. It's quite fascinating that they have no grounding in values or principles other than being against. It's the classic angry politics that really has no foundation.
No, that's exactly what it is. And not only are they against this, but they don't want the followers that are out there on the streets protesting to be thinking too much about what they're doing. So they actually create the messaging and the talking points and everything and hand it out to these folks so that they just repeat what's being said and they don't question it. And I think that what I find interesting is when I go to these protests and I ask people some questions about their principles. What principle, is it that brought you out to this particular protest to say, hands off my, this or whatever the case may be? And I found that nobody can answer the questions. They don't have answers. They have the talking points on the sheets that they were provided, but outside of that, it's, I get a lot of blank stares. And I found that at least, locally, what I've experienced is a lot of folks who were reminiscing about their days protesting and going to Woodstock, and they kind of felt like this might be their last chance to go out and do something fun.
Wow.
They don't really even know that they understand how they're being manipulated and used to push this narrative that you talked about, Chris.
Well, you almost have, Aaron and Michael, the seats or the decoration of a stage. You've got these, quote, mostly peaceful protesters, in this case, the No Kings. You've got the media there, the mainstream media calling it, again, they pulled it back out, mostly peaceful. And then you have the paid agitators that are criminals. And so you've really got this performance art going on. And I wonder, everybody, as people watch this, there's been commentary that they are reminding people of why they did not vote for Democrats last November. Is this actually going to be counterproductive for them in the future?
Yeah, I think it should be in a rational environment, and but I don't know, some of these people that falling into this, like Jackie was saying, they don't even know why they're there or what the cause really is. And I would suppose that's probably why they have a host hotline. So for time sensitive support, you can call, and it's going to be up and operational on that weekend. And they also
let's call in, Aaron. Let's call and record it and ask them Jackie some questions about what exactly the king. Why are they calling him a king? What has he done? What if he's done something illegal, in other words, outside the authority of the executive branch of the president? What is it?
Right.
I mean, they're fascinating conversations. And I know we probably are all within a couple miles of a No Kings protest on Saturday. I would encourage everybody to get out there and just go ask some questions to the folks that are out protesting about what brought them out and what I found is that we end up sharing more of the same feelings and the same positions than we're different. But these folks, I think, just got caught up in sort of the emotional aspect of it. And I think that's what the organizers of these protests are really good at is they're really good at preying on people's emotions. And so they're able to reach these folks that are, I mean, I think a lot of the protesters that I met are just really nice people and they want to care about everything, but they've been kind of tricked into and deceived about what they're out there for.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jackie, because every Wednesday, and I've said it on here before, I actually go and sit for an hour in a room with some libertarians and primarily Democrats. I'm usually I am the only Republican, Frederick Douglass Republican that shows up. And when we start talking about shared values, constitutional principles, that sort of thing, the conversation changes, but it's an echo chamber and a vacuum of Trump bashing and everything he did. Like they were showing Pam Bondi, how she was saying how many lives were saved because of all the fentanyl being stopped at the border. And I'm like, that really, okay, so she might have misspoke, but at the same time, let's stop looking at the personalities of things and, get back to what the actual root of the problem is. And there's an actual attorney in there that him and I agree on things because we're looking at it from the constitutional principles of how things should work or how the founders set it up to work. But I think there's one in Willimantic. Maybe I will go over and take a peek and see what's going over. Maybe I'll take
your advice. Jackie, over the years, and Michael, Aaron, when one watches, say, Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson and reads particularly Douglas Murray, an all-star, you really come up with what I think are 4 principles for dealing with people like this. First of all is asking exactly what they mean. So what is no kings? What do you mean? What are you exactly against specifically? And can you give me an example? As they go on, I find if you ask, well, tell me a little more, how would that work? Or what would that look like? So let's sort of take your proposition and move it forward. What would the solution be besides just protesting? What would you want to change? So, somewhere along the line, you're going to find they will come unraveled because, well, let's have an election. Gosh, didn't we just have one last November? Was it overwhelming? But the final question you ask these people is when they suggest something, do you think the majority of people in this country would think that is fair? Fair polls, right and left. Americans have a great sense of fairness. That's why we have team sports and, there's actually a referee and they get angry, but there's a sense of fairness. And these people can't answer any of these questions I've just posed. And we get to what's fair. Jack, I'd love you to ask, what would be the solution here? What is the no king solution to the problem you seem to see? It'd be fascinating to hear what that is.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, at the last protest that I went to in Stanford, it was attended by, I went specifically because it was attended by Senator Richard Blumenthal. And I wanted to ask him a couple questions about a vote that he had made against protecting girls and girls sports. And I had asked exactly those questions to a protester that I marched the whole way around the block with this person and, had a lovely conversation. And at the end of the conversation, I said, so what's the answer? What do we do here? What is the solution to the problems that we just, discussed? We both agreed are problems. And this lovely man, probably in his 70s, very, very friendly, just looked at me and said, it would really, I think if someone took Trump out and he was dead, then that would really solve a lot of our problems.
Wow.
Calmly said that to me and I was stunned.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, what person to think that that's the solution to the problem? And, and I said, so that's something that you would want to do? He's like, oh no, I would never do it myself. But, if someone else did, it wouldn't be a bad thing.
Wow.
And I don't understand how people get to that particular line of thinking myself. I wish maybe we need a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
Yeah. Well, guys, on a historical perspective for a minute, someone said, well, Trump is authoritarian. And I said, well, how so? He's using the executive order And I think with every executive order, everybody correct me if I'm wrong, they lay out the legal basis, their argument of what the legal basis is for taking action, both the context in the case of LA under Article 2, supporting local law enforcement, didn't say it's an insurrection, said it's supporting law enforcement, and all the others. So it strikes me, I asked Kay Carl the other day, wasn't the Emancipation Proclamation one of the most famous executive orders? He said, yeah, it was. Now, it wasn't very popular. People sort of scratch their head. Can he do that? So it's just interesting that we look at these things and they say, well, he's a king or an autocrat. Well, what action did he take that you think is illegal, contrary to our Constitution? I'd love, again, Jackie, anybody to see what they say.
You know, it's very interesting. For many years, I've been attempting to engage and figure this out. It's some sort of psychological condition that people are experiencing, because no questions can be answered. And the worst part of it, from my perspective, is that there's actually no desire to answer the questions. They believe what they believe, and what they intend to do is isolate you and demean you if you don't believe the same as they do. And I had a friend just the other day post on social media that she went into a doctor's office and down in Texas, and the doctor, the person waiting on her, said, well, now we need to ask you to make a declaration that you're a citizen or not. And that question being answered by her was something that was so offensive that she went on this long tirade about Donald Trump. And the whole reason that this is to me is because Donald Trump. And I just quickly messaged to her, is that what the attendant said, that it was Donald Trump's fault? No.
Crazy.
It's crazy.
Well, Jackie, any last thoughts for us in the Liberty Collaborative? Your perspective, you've studied the Constitution. You understand what you do is based on trying to protect individual liberty, from men competing in sports to flags at the high school there in Greenwich that you had to fight, constantly being overwhelmed. What do we do as people trying to defend our basic values and constitutional principles?
Well, I can tell you what I do personally. And what I do personally is I think it's important to hold our elected officials accountable. To that end, any opportunity that I have to be able to go out in public, I take it. I take those opportunities, ask them the hard questions that they don't want to answer. And sometimes they don't answer. Sometimes they just walk away from me, even if it's like on a public stage in front of 1,500 people. And I think it's important for people to see that, right? I think we need to expose that. I think we need to be out there and be on the front lines and let people know what's really going on. So that's kind of how I roll, right? And that's why I would encourage everybody this weekend to get out there and join the protests and ask questions and document it and record it. And, you know, find your local politicians at these events and find out exactly what principles they're out there supporting, so that all of their constituents can understand that and write about it, expose it.
That's excellent.
Thanks so much, guys. It was a lovely joining conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
Sure. I'll talk to you. Bye.
All right.
Where do we pick up the echo?
I think, Mike, that's on your end.
On my end?
If I mute you, I don't have any echo.
Wow, that's weird.
Yeah, just came.
How about now?
It's good.
Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Let me see. I'm gonna mic Chris for a second. All right. There's no echo there. I wonder if it's on my end. Chris, do you have any echo now?
No.
Okay, it's gone. That's weird.
Yeah, I never had any echo. So.
Yeah, it came, Aaron, halfway through. Jackie was talking, suddenly it was echoing.
Yeah, I started trying to figure out who it was by muting everybody.
Yeah.
No, that was good having her call in. As I looked through this as she was talking, it's quite amazing that there were so like all these different hands off and all these other protests that they have a whole digital assessment management packet here where somebody spent some time putting all these images together. No king since 1776. I have friends everywhere. Liberty and
Like this would
justice for
play
all.
into this is a racket. This is
It is.
It
and
is
none of them are particularly big, but
yeah,
you do a lot of them.
yeah, absolutely a racket, absolutely well organized. The whole thing is about controlling the language and making things mean the opposite of what a riot is now peaceful protest, right?
Yeah.
It's just absolutely crazy. So I think, one of the things I talk about in my Substack article is that one of the first things that we have to do is we have to stand up against the changing of language and challenge it everywhere that we see it. And I've got friends who are poets. Stephanie made a post on Facebook, I think it was, where she said riots, the words riot and peace and protest do not go together. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the next thing you know, you had all kinds of people talking about Trump, all kinds of people saying, well, or you can't be talking about the peaceful protest in Los Angeles, right? So what we're doing is we have people, what's going on is you have people out there that are attempting to sell en masse this false narrative about what's going on. Donald Trump is a king. Well, I'm surprised they didn't say no dictators versus no kings, right? I would ask that question. Why did you choose kings over dictators? But it's all about manipulating the language and changing the language, and in essence, by doing that, changing reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Guys, Douglas Murray and again, I mentioned Jordan Peterson, I mentioned Ben Shapiro, but one of the things when you watch them is they reject straw man arguments, right? That are sort of permutations of gaslighting. To your point, Mike, if they can sort of control the topic sentence and get you debating it, and that's why not accepting it, saying, well, what do you mean? Well, can we get to somewhere? Remember when we did basic math, we had something called the lowest common denominator. Like, but break this down for me. What are we really talking about here? And specifically for you, protester, what right or law, how has this affected you? Well, it really hasn't. I see. So we're in Connecticut here, Michael. You know how much our government spent last year in the fourth most expensive state in the nation on illegal immigrants?
How much?
1.3 billion. Aaron, I think I'm about right on that number.
Yeah, I believe so.
So $1.3 billion of our taxpayer money spent on people here illegally. And we know that some of them have criminal records. We know that Connecticut's on the list of states that have declared themselves sanctuary. And Michael, what you'd find funny here, Aaron, is a bunch of the mayors and the governor said, well, not exactly. Connecticut, we're cooperating in certain. So they've tried to sort of debate that they're not exactly sanctuary.
Chris, those are all great points, and you're right. There's, I think you're going to start seeing more of these states become less sanctuary states, and so we're talking about LA and the riots and how they're mostly peaceful, so to speak. And this came up in the group I was at yesterday when I was listening to them talk. So I, came home. I was like, you know what? I don't know how many times or how many presidents actually federalized the National Guard or had the military to come in. So I did a quick little, I jumped on my AI platform, started chatting with it. And this is what do you have any idea? Does anybody know, Mike or Chris, how many times in history the presidents have initiated the National Guard?
Quite a lot.
Yep. Quite a
Well,
few.
this gave me 5, and so I had
Oh.
asked, when have presidents used the National Guard and military members to stop violent protests? So the first one was Dwight Eisenhower in 1957 at Little Rock, Arkansas,
Yep.
and that had to do with the Arkansas National Guard blocking black students from integrating Central High School. So they Eisenhower federalized the National Guard and sent in the 101st Airborne, those guys with the red berets, to enforce desegregation. And you got to love my platform. It even gave me a great Douglas quote. It says, "A man's right rests in 3 boxes: the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box." So the other one was John F. Kennedy in 1962, University of Mississippi. Again, it had to do with desegregation, and that is where the U.S. Marshals and the federalized National Guard troops came in. Lyndon B. Johnson, 67 to 68, urban riots, and that was widespread riots in Detroit, Newark, and other cities following racial tensions of the MLK assassination. George H.W. Bush, 92, the LA riots. So, and that was after Rodney King. The Marines and Army were sent in an insurrection act. And then number 5, Donald Trump himself. That was apparently during the George Floyd riots, or protests rather. So it's not like it hasn't been done before, but I guess if it doesn't fit the narrative, it doesn't fit their goals.
Right.
So.
Exactly.
The famous governor at the time and candidate Vice President Waltz didn't call the National Guard for what, 2 days, as they burned down people's lifelong businesses.
Yep.
The other thing that's interesting, guys, is I saw some narrative that people said, well, you were against sending in the National Guard in Texas. And again, facts matter. Partly of this show, we like to give context. What they were against was that they wanted to send the National Guard to stop the Texas Rangers from stopping illegal immigrants. And they said, well, their barbed wire on the island is interfering with our activities. Folks, remember what those activities were? Processing illegal immigrants as fast as they could through the border.
Yep.
So in that case, the National Guard and the Texas Rangers, and I don't know if this was ever publicized exactly, the letters, but they communicated to each other that they're not going to conflict with each other. Their commanders are not going to put them in a position where they're in conflict.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, that's for sure. Mike, what else do you have on it, since you just wrote a Substack about it?
The main point that I'm making in the Substack is just how George Orwell was a prophet in this sense, right? When you start to take a look at things like new speak and double think, how you take and twist words and situations to mean things the total opposite of what they actually do mean. It's like it forces us as human beings, or those who are what I would call less conscious, to live with contradiction, right? And my perspective has been for quite some time is that once they can get you into accepting things that are contradictory, then you are being controlled. And so that's the thing that I see. I've got friends, lifelong friends, who basically have made a decision about who I support and what I think, not having any kind of conversation with me about anything, but because they think that I am a Trump supporter, which I do support. I support Donald Trump, but I support Donald Trump because of the policies, right? That he, these are policies that I've long held, and it was absolutely great seeing someone coming along and beginning to champion those things. But these people, they don't care about policy. They're ideologues, and they simply, and the idea is Donald Trump bad. If Donald Trump is bad and you support anything related to Donald Trump, then you too are bad. And so the Substack really deals with how the left uses language and subverts language and creates false narratives and contradictory ideas to ultimately with the intent of subjugating subjugating our citizenry.
And Aaron, that will be published on the Liberty Collaborative Substack account.
It will. I will get it up there in the next day or two. So,
and folks,
absolutely.
check out, go to Substack, just search Liberty Collaborative, 2 words, and you'll find our account. And all of us contribute articles. We try and do a couple of months. We're going to increase the rate. But again, our focus is context and historical perspective, not just rant.
Right.
You know, we think there's no reason we can't have a civil discourse because values unite, issues divide. And Michael, thank you for saying that. For anyone who is on this show, we're about the founding and our constitutional framework and elected officials respecting that, because we've seen, right, Aaron, Frederick Douglass's key principles of limited government, power to the family, individual liberty, and all these things that erode those individual liberties. Generally, we're against. Frederick Douglass was against. Really, one of the greatest things he said, and maybe this is a good way to wrap up our show with comments like this, is, remember, guys, when Frederick Douglass, you find the quote, he said, "Leave us alone. We don't want your help.
Right.
Just leave us alone." And when you look at the results of what happens when you leave people alone, they thrive. That was Frederick Douglass saying, we got to get educated. We've got to take action and go to work, but leave us alone.
Absolutely.
I think that is a great way to leave it, Chris. Unless, Mike, you have anything else to add? That was
nothing else.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. You can always find all of our contact information and the links to our Substack, YouTube channel, and elsewhere in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next Liberty Collaborative podcast.
Thanks for joining us on the Liberty Collaborative. If today's episode lit a fire or gave you clarity, share it and be part of the movement. Subscribe, leave a review, and keep the conversation going. Until next time, stand firm, stay free.